Yeah, so automate everything. Well, automate almost everything. Yeah, so on the Android team, we did some work with our CI to streamline our development process so you can concentrate more on coding and building things rather than having to spend as much time as you are on code reviewing and releases and such. You still have to do code and you still have to do work, unfortunately, but we can try and alleviate some of the process with CI. And so yeah, the main thing for the Snackchat is just to share what we're doing, feed anyone who's curious about continuous integration and continuous deployment, and also maybe spark some discussion about how other teams can maybe make use of the things we're using and maybe have some suggestions on how we can improve what we're doing on the Android team as well. Pretty much just sums up what Snackchats are about. So, but yeah, so the first thing is these are some of the things which we've started automating in the Android team. So we have a number of different automated checks on our code reviews, and whether it's code style, picking up common things that can cause bugs on the Android platform, maybe missing tests. And these are all automated in our code review process. And we will now also have manually triggered releases via tags and also automated releases every Tuesday and Thursday. And now the last two are probably more relevant to mobile because on web you trigger releases quite often and it works quite differently on mobile. So if you have time, we'll go through that as well. Yeah, so in the first part of this chat, we'll look at the automated code review. So we use a plugin that will comment on our code reviews to save us some time. And yeah, the main reason we did this is because code reviews take time, and code reviews are great because we can learn a lot from one another. Whether it's back and forth on like technical things or discussions, they're really beneficial. But with code reviews also comes a lot of other things. So whether we're picking up on stylistic things, whether there's common bugs that get picked up, for example, on Android, if you don't use the correct imports or extend from the correct views, from like support libraries and so on, you can cause issues. And these mistakes are really easy to make sometimes. But when you're code reviewing, you have to look out for them because those things can slip through easily. And with all those things added up, if a code review consists of a lot of style changes, missing tests, introduced bugs and so on, you can sort of take your focus away from the technical issues. And those are the things that really matter. So if we can automate all of the not less important, but automate all the things that can be automated, and we have more time to focus on solving the technical things. So to solve this problem, we use a plugin called Danger, and people might have heard of Danger before, you might not have. I had no clue what it was up until Marcus introduced it to me a couple of years ago, and we finally got around to using it properly. So these things take time. But Danger is available for anything. Like, it doesn't matter what platform you're using. Danger doesn't really care about what language your code is written in. It just works with GitHub. It analyzes GitHub repositories, and yeah, so you can use it pretty much whether dependent on whatever platform you're using. The main thing with Danger, I'm not going to run through the entire setup because it's all documented pretty well, but there's just a few things. You need a GitHub account that can comment on your pull requests for you. Luckily, we have this handy Bufferbot, which I think Dan set up. So Bufferbot does all our code review commenting. Bufferbot lets us know if we've got things going wrong in our code reviews or we've missed tests. And a thing that I like about this is that it removes any like personal, not that people intend to have like personal impact on code reviews, but it removes any kind of conflict that could come from any code reviews at all, because all these comments are coming from a completely random GitHub account that has no persona at all. So even if it's being picky, it's coming from a bot, which is, makes it easier to take in. And Danger is really easy to set up. It's simply just a Ruby file on your CI, and you simply provide it with the URL to your pull requests and also import the package for Danger. Now, if you're using CI, essentially, if your CI allows you to run custom scripts, which I think a lot of them do, the three that I looked at when we were choosing ours did, then you can run Danger. As long as you can execute Bash and shell scripts, then you can use Danger and similar plugins. And then on your CI, all you simply need to do is install the danger from that script, and then when you want to use it, is execute it. So within 4 steps, we essentially tell danger what GitHub repository we want to use, install it, and then run it when required. And that's pretty much all that's needed once we've got our little buffer bot set up, which is already done. So I just want to run through our pull request workflow quickly and share what we're doing there and how we're making use of danger to automate some of our review process. So to begin with, our code review, our pull request is pretty straightforward at the start. So the developer will open a pull request. At that point, our CI has a trigger. So that our CI gets triggers and kicks off the development workflow, which, yeah, that's a pretty normal thing for it to do. And then from there, our unit and integration tests are run. And that will run our tests, and if any fail, it will flag us. But that's all, again, pretty standard. When to close my door, my dog's going nuts. And then from there, if we have our first danger influenced thing that comes into place. So on Android, dependencies change all the time. New versions get released, and I'm sure it's the same on any platform. And if you're using a lot of dependencies, it can be pretty hard to keep track of what versions you're using, if you're using latest version and so on. And it's quite a long process to check them all. So danger allows you to easily read from files that are stored or generated on your repository. So for example, on Android, we have this plugin that we customize a bit that essentially checks a thing called the Maven repository, which holds all of our dependencies, and checks the latest versions and diffs them against the versions being used in our app. These, any versions that are out of date are then stored in a dependencies.txt file within our repository. And because this danger file is within our repository, we can simply reference that text file, even though it's not generated until our CI is run. So you could do something like this, where you simply check if any dependencies are out of date, and then use this warn function to print out a message on your pull request. Or you could do something similar that is making use of a generated text file. And when this is run, our CI simply logs out a message on our pull request saying, for example, the Facebook SDK is 2 versions behind, or this other library is out of date, which lets us know that things aren't quite up to date and we need to update them. And this, again, saves us time from checking them manually and needing to keep up to track with things. And again, you could do something similar. Whatever kind of text file you're generating, you can reference it in this Ruby file and log it out. We also have things called lint checks. So again, this is not platform specific to Android. We have linting across different languages. For us, we perform 2 different types of lint checks. We have code style checks. So these are really picky things like tabs and spaces and like indentations, and like, as well as the naming of variables, like are things named properly, the files have the correct order inside of them, like private fields ordered correctly with public fields and so on. And we also have Android issue checks, and this is more Android specific. So the thing I mentioned before about views using the correct view type, are they using the correct dependency types and so on, are you missing translations? Those are Android checks that are run. So for this, we make use of Danger plugins, and there's a community around Danger which provides lots of different plugins for you to hook into. So what we do here is we generate some reports on our CI, which are stored in these report XML files, and then we use these plugins that have been created by the community to reference these files. So what these plugins do is they take our reports and reference the line numbers of the pull request, and then logs a message exactly where those errors have been found. So if I have numerous code style errors, or if I have numerous Android bugs that have been introduced, Danger will comment exactly where those things have happened in my pull request, so that I know that those things are there. And if you're making large pull requests with big changes, these things can be a huge time saver and help you avoid any bugs occurring in these areas. And there's probably similar things for iOS and web platforms as well when it comes to linting. So all that doesn't actually happen until you run Danger and you execute it. But when we do run Danger, we have access to essentially the whole of the pull request. So not only do you have access to the authors or the the comments and the description, we also have access to all of the files which are in the pull request. So we have a list of added files and a list of modified files. And this is really powerful because you essentially can do any kind of diffing, any kind of checks to ensure that maybe sensitive files aren't being changed, maybe files are missing. You can essentially perform any kind of checks that you like. And the first thing we do is we check for sensitive file modifications. It's happened to me a few times before where I've pushed stuff live, where I've been playing between the dev and the production API, and I've been like, did I change it back to production or did I accidentally leave it on dev? And I've had like a bit of a panic and I've had to go check, like I haven't actually changed it. And thanks to Danger, we can now add checks to ensure that we haven't touched those files. So I've taken out the code here because it's not relevant, but using these modified files check, we can simply check if that modified files list contains a specific file. So in our case, we have something called a service factory, which holds our API endpoint and the API base URL. And we simply check if that modified file contains this service factory class. And if it does, then we can log out a message on our pull request and say, hey, it looks like this file was modified, and could you make sure the production API is being used? And that's really helpful because if the dev API is being used, then all hell could break loose once that release goes out. So this helps us to add a layer of protection to avoid that happening. There's probably ways to check if that variable is a specific, if that variable of the URL in that file is a specific string, but I haven't found out how to do that yet, so that could be worth checking out. We can also do some pretty cool stuff with diffing. So one of the things we do is, so we don't have code coverage yet, and we did previously, but it doesn't work with our current setup. So what we do instead is we do some diffing against test files. The code's not the prettiest, but essentially we loop through those files that we've got that have been added or modified. And because all of our test files against our classes, so for example, say we have a class called user helper, and our test for that class would be user helper test. So what we do is we loop through all of our files and check whether a file exists or has been modified with the test suffix on the end. And if it hasn't, we log out something to say, hey, you modified this file, but you didn't modify the tests, or you added this file, but you didn't add a test file for it. Just so that we are aware that we might have not covered all our grounds. And that's not saying you have to add tests for that, but just to make you think, oh, maybe I should have added one there. And because we have access to those files, we can pretty much do whatever we want with them. But so we don't have to do the diffing. For example, if you just want to know if the tests have been updated, you can just perform a grep operation on a certain directory in your repository and say, hey, has the test been changed at all? Maybe you're making small pull requests, and if the test has been changed at all, maybe that's good enough. But we wanted to go one step further and give more information to the author of the PR, like if it's a specific test file has been modified. So all we do is loop through those modified files and diff the names of our test keyword. And if a test file is missing or hasn't been modified, we let the author of the PR know that that is the case. And we also check for important file changes using Danger. So because our release process is now automated, we have a what's new file. And this basically is a change log that we have to update now with whenever we make changes to our code, so that when the automated release happens, that what's new is up to date and can be used with the release. So because of this, we essentially, again, use Danger. We use that modified files list to check for the what's new file name and check that it's contained within that list. And if not, we simply give a warning to the pull request author in the pull request and say, just let them know that they didn't change this file and that it's possibly required to do so. So if you have files similar that have to be updated with pull requests or with specific tasks, you can do the same thing and so that you also know that they may have forgotten to update a specific file. And you can do other things. There's easy ways of doing this, like modified file checks. So we only did it this way because we've already have our looping for our files. But there's simpler ways that are more natural, written naturally, using the include function there. So you can take that modified list and check that it includes a specific file, and if not, you can either fail or you can warn the user that they haven't done so. We can also do pull request size checks. So if, I don't know if other teams are enforcing like file sizes, pull request sizes on their code reviews, but sometimes it's easy to make massive pull requests, and sometimes you get the habit of doing it, and it's cool. It's nicer to keep pull requests smaller so that they're easier to check and more manageable. And if they're like that, then less bugs are likely to slip through. So Danger also gives us access to the number of lines of code in the PR, so we can check if things are of a certain size. And again, we don't fail things, but we just give a gentle nudge to say, hey, maybe next time, think about splitting things up into separate tasks. Again, we don't want to be forceful with these things, just like gentle nudges to let people know. And the neat thing that I like is automatic assign of users. So Danger gives us also access to assigning authors to PRs. So it's pretty easy for, would be pretty easy for the mobile teams because we're only 2 on each. So the way me and Victoria do it is if she opens a pull request, then it assigns me. If I open a pull request, it assigns her. Probably have to do some more thinking with that on web because there's a lot more people at play. Maybe you have to have some machine learning model in place. But for the mobile teams, it's pretty easy for us to do that. And that's neat because when you open a PR, sometimes it can be quite hard to forget, quite easy to forget to assign people, or maybe you're doing it at the end of the day and you sort of slips your mind. So this automatically does it for us when Danger runs. And this just sits in the Danger file as well. And then we just add a nice touch to the end of our Danger script, just to add a nice little message to the author of the PR, and that there may be some suggestions to them. Although it's not a human doing it, it just makes it feel a little bit more human than it being a robot. And they're currently all the Danger steps that we have in place, just to make us a little bit more productive when it comes to our pull requests and our code reviews on those requests. Do you have any questions so far on that part before I go on to the next bit? Cool. Now we also have the second part. So maybe we covered Danger, and we covered some of the things that Danger can do. Again, it's worth checking out the documentation if you want to see more things that it can do. We're not using everything. And the second part is our release process, which we've only just recently started using. So to begin with, trigger releases. So the whole reason we've started automating our release process is mainly to reduce the responsibility silo. Mainly, previously, it was just only me putting out releases, and as we know, only having one person responsible for something is quite bad practice, and it's not a good idea because the bus factor. What happens if they're on holiday? What happens if they're ill, and so on? And we need to get a release out. Not one person should be responsible for anything. So having an automated releases helps us to remove that. It also removes any cases of human error. Maybe I've made local changes that I've forgotten about, and I've made a build and put the build out, and those changes are in that build. Removes any cognitive load as well. Like, it's only a bit, but having to think, oh, I need to schedule this into my day to put this release out, and then I've got to test the release, and I've got to upload it and write the description and so on. It's a good half an hour to 45 minutes of the day. So having removed that is great. It also means you don't have to distribute key stores and security keys and so on. Every time someone joins the Android team or so on, we have to give them those keys, and it's not a good idea to pass those around because as soon as you have those secrets, they never change. So people have access to them forever. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's the reasons why we now automate our process. So the first one is trigger releases. I think so. This is pretty similar to how web has with bufferbot deploy. I think you do that in Slack and it just sends it off and does it all for you. This is pretty much the same thing as that. So now on the Android team, we essentially do a git tag in the console and push that tag to GitHub, and our CI will pick up that tag and handle it all for us. Previously, you would have to do all the builds manually, but now this makes it a lot easier. So if we need to put a build out quickly, or someone wants to put something out, we can do so. And all this does is we push the tag to the GitHub to get to the GitHub, push the tag to GitHub, and then for our releases, we have RC tags and non-RC tags. And our CI will look at that tag and decide whether it's a beta release or not. Depending on that result, it will trigger a beta build or a master build. And then it will sign our APK for us, upload the APK as long as the release notes, and then release it to the Play Store. So all we have to do is push 2 things to GitHub and it will do it for us, and we don't have to worry about anything else. That's pretty neat process for us now, and that was a great step. But one of the things we're done to take that further is completely automated releases, which on Android was quite difficult to achieve at first, but we've managed to get something that's working that works well and that doesn't interfere with our triggered releases. So what we're doing now is we're automating releases every Tuesday and Thursday, and if you still want to push things manually, it won't break the automated releases at all, which is handy. So how this works is it reaches Tuesday, it reaches Thursday, and our CI will check. So again, all of this is done in scripts. So if your CI supports bash scripts and so on, you can do any of this kind of stuff depending on platform. Our script will check the latest commit in our GitHub repository, and it will diff that against the previous commit that was done in the last release. If that commit's different, but if that commit's the same, then it will just abort and it won't do anything. If that commit's different though, it means that things have changed and that we're due to release something. And it will then store that commit reference for the next automated release. It will generate a new Git tag. That's where some of the magic happens, because maybe the last release was an RC version, maybe the last release was a production version. So we have to either remove the RC, increment the minor release and so on. And there's sort of a lot of hacky scripting that is going on there, which haven't showed the code for obvious reasons. But yeah, so that's all happening there and it works. And then once that Git tag's generated, it automatically pushes the Git tag to our repository for us. And then the first workflow that we looked at is triggered. So we're reusing our first workflow to automate our release process. And again, this is all using our CI, and none of this happens locally, and it's all happening in bash scripts. And this means that we can remove any responsibilities from a singular person and also give ourselves some more time to concentrate on building things. That's pretty much it. I think we're almost running out of time. So there's some links here if you want to read up more. I think the first one's probably the most important, is just having a look at danger systems and what it can do. I've run through some of the things, but it's not much steps to get it set up. And if anyone wants to play around with it or get it set up on the CI or Jenkins, I'm happy to help out and try and get it working. Well, not try, but we'll get it working. So yeah, feel free to message me if you want to get it working, and we can have a play around. And the last 2 are just some blog posts I wrote for our CI service about our process, and they go a bit more into depth about how things are working. But yeah, that's it. I hope that's given a little bit of insight into some of the automation that we've done with our CI and how you could use it in your CI if you're making use of one. Again, all of the danger stuff is completely platform independent. It's just using GitHub and the data that's provided by GitHub. So regardless of what language you're using, you can make use of that also. Yeah, with that said, does anyone have any questions about danger, about automation, or anything at all?
I have one.
Go for it.
So you mentioned that you got your releases kind of scheduled regularly. I think looking at that sort of the last screen there, if you or Victoria pushed any sort of changes, that will kind of trigger the rest of the release flow. If no changes have been made to the branch, it'll abort. But if you're overriding that flow, or well, I'm sure you do, but what is the method for overriding that if you really want to kind of sneak something in there before the release?
Oh, so I think it cut out a bit then. So if it was already building and we put changes in the repository and then we wanted to get those in.
Yeah, if you have made changes to the branch that are ready to go once the released window occurs, but you decide you do want to try and fit something else into that release, yeah. Is there a way that you have to override it or like push it back a few hours or anything?
Because yeah, so in Bitrise in the console, like on the dashboard, you can pause it. So it's set to go out every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, but we could override a specific release and just set it back a couple of hours, or just cancel it completely. Like we cancelled one last week because we were in the middle of working on something big for beta and we wanted to put it out on Friday instead. So yeah, you can push them back, and that's why I wanted to make sure our manual, like our our Git tags didn't break the automated workflow. And so even if we want to push stuff out again, like the next day, we still can do it manually.
Nice, pretty cool.
Any other questions? Or if not yet, then feel free to put something in the channel afterwards, or ping me. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But yeah, yeah, thanks for coming along. It's been great sharing some stuff. Again, if anyone wants to have a play with Danger, feel free to get in touch, and yeah, happy to help out there. And yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks again. I'll stop the recording.